tonight, you'll get blessed with Daniel and the lion's den. If you remember, you might not remember, but I'll just remember, help you remember. Darius was the king. He was the king over the kingdom at this time. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom, and Darius set over the kingdom. He had 120 princes who were to rule the whole kingdom. And over these were 3 presidents. One of the presidents that reigned over the land was Daniel. Daniel was the first prince or president. The princes were to give account to them, so that the king would have no trouble. So the 3 presidents that King Darius had set in place, they were the people. That's who the people would go to. Because see, Darius just couldn't handle all the people. So the troubles would be reported to these 3 presidents, and Daniel had to be the first. Daniel was put over the presidents and was put over the prince because of his excellent mind. Remember, Daniel had an excellent mind. And the story leading up to Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel could interpret dreams, and he could interpret things that were written on the wall. So he had done that in days past. And so Daniel was favored in the kingdom. And the king planned to put him over the whole kingdom. So Daniel was in a position where he could be put over the whole kingdom. Then the presidents and princes, they tried to find fault with Daniel. They looked everywhere concerning the kingdom, but they couldn't find any fault in Daniel. Because Daniel was a faithful man, he was loyal, and there was no error or fault to be found in him. So they were trying to figure out, we can't find anything that he's doing wrong. He's not dealing with the people in a bad way. He's dealing with people kindly and fairly. So what did the other presidents do in the land? We shall not find any grounds for complaining against Daniel unless it was his worshiping of the God. So that's where they found fault in Daniel, because Daniel was really Daniel would
what you need with me? What do you want?
We shall not have. So they couldn't find anything wrong with Daniel. The only thing wrong with Daniel is that he worshiped God. Okay? How would you like somebody to find fault in you, and all they can find is that you worship God, you believe in God? So that's the only thing that they could find against Daniel. So these presidents and these other people that was in charge, they assembled together before the king. He said the king. So they sort of tricked Darius a little bit. The king, if you think about it. King Darius lived forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, and the governors, and the prince, and the counselors, and the captains have consulted together about establishing a royal law by a firm order that whoever asks anything of any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast in the lion's den. Okay, so let's recap. So King Darius was king. He had presidents and governors and princes set over his land. The number 1 was Daniel. Daniel had found favor with the king. They couldn't find anything that the king had done, that Daniel had done wrong, except serve God. Okay, so these governors and other counselors and captains, they went before the king, and they said, "King, we want to establish a new law that if anybody asks anything of any god other than you, O king, shall be thrown in the lion's den." Well, they knew right then that Daniel was going to pray. If it was time to pray, Daniel was going to pray to God, his God, our God, the true God. Not the king, not some kind of idol, but the one and true God. So Daniel, he's going to pray. He's going to pray and he's going to worship God. Now, O king, establish this order and sign it in writing, that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not change. So they sort of tricked Darius into passing a new law that says, okay, for the next 30 days, the only person that you can go to and ask for anything is the king. You can't ask any other god. You can't ask your God. And so they had King Darius. He signed it. He signed it in writing. And when Daniel knew that the law was signed and rectified, he went into his house with his windows open, in his chambers facing Jerusalem. He knelt down 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks to God, just as he'd done before. So Daniel, he did not change from where he did not change from what he had been doing. He didn't do it in secret. He kept his windows open. He did what he normally did, prayed 3 times a day to God. He didn't pray to Darius. He didn't go to Darius and ask for anything. But he knelt and prayed like he had normally done. And then guess what? What do you think the governors and the princes and the kings, the governors and the counselors, what do you think they did? Well, let me tell you, the men, they all come together and found Daniel praying, which they knew they would do that. That was no surprise. And entreated God. So Daniel was there praying to God. And guess what they did? They run back to Darius. They hurried to Darius and reminded him of his order. O King Darius, didn't you sign this order? That anybody in the land caught praying and asking for anything beside anything of anybody except you, O king? What did you say? Throw in lines then. Did you not sign an order that any man asking in favor of any god or any man within 30 days except yourself, O king, shall be thrown in the den of lions? The king answered, this is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not change. So once he set that law in place, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, King Darius couldn't go back and undo that because he had already signed saying, hey, this is law. Then they asked and said to the king, then Daniel, who is one of the children of the captive of Judah, does not respect you, O king, nor the decree which you have signed, but makes his request 3 times a day. To who? God. He went home and he prayed 3 times a day. He didn't do it in private. He did as he'd always done. When King Darius heard these words, the king was very, very sad. He was displeased with himself for falling into their trap. And he set his heart on saving Daniel, so he tried to save Daniel. He thought into the setting of his son about how to save Daniel. Then the man came before the king and said, remember, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no order or law which the king lays down can be changed. So no matter what he thought of, Darius could not change what he had done. Then the king commanded them to take Daniel and throw him in the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, your God, whom you serve so faithfully, surely he will save you. Then the king, he went to his palace that night, and usually when the king went to the palace, they had dancing, feasting, and just had musical instruments and stuff to eat. And so that night, the king went to his palace and passed the night in fasting. He didn't have any musical instruments. They were not brought to him, and he did not sleep at all. So very early the next morning, the king arose and hurried to the den of lions. When he came to the den, he cried out in a sorrowing voice to Daniel and said to him, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve so faithfully been able to save you from the lions? Have you ever thought about what did the king believe? He called to Daniel, right? So somehow I almost feel like the king, he sort of felt like, hey, the one and only true God, let's see if Daniel calls me. So I never thought of it that way, but what was the king thinking? He had to have something on his mind because he actually called to Daniel. Why else would there be a reason to call Daniel's name? I mean, he's thrown into a a pack of lions, hungry lions, I'm sure. Okay, so then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, so they did not hurt me, because I was innocent in his sight. And I have done no harm to you either, king. So he's reminded Darius that he's done Darius no harm and no wrong, not done wrong. The king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that Daniel should be brought up out of the den. So Daniel was brought up out of the den, and it was out of the den of lions. Did he have a scratch on him? Not a scratch. No kind of evidence that he had just spent the night in the den, in the lion's den. So there was no wound found on him because he believed in God. He believed that God could rescue him from the lions. Remember that God said in John 14:14, can you say that for me, Phyllis? Do you remember John 14:14?
All right, I'll tell you.
Is anybody familiar with what he tells us there? John 14:14. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. That's a good passage. Then the king gave commandments, and he brought the men. Remember the men, the governors, the counselors, the prince of the kingdom. He had brought them who had accused Daniel. He cast them into the lion's den with their children and their wives. He wiped their families out. And the lions, what do you think the lions did?
Probably ate them.
Feasted. The lions feasted, didn't
Yeah, feasted.
families of these men had made bad decisions and had been crooked with Darius. The King Darius wrote to all people and nations in all the languages on earth. And here's what King Darius said. Peace be multiplied to you. I now command that in every part of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, unchanging forever, and his kingdom shall never, never be destroyed. And his power shall continue to the end. He rescues and he saves, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And that was the end of that. Any questions?
I've never really heard the end of that.
Really?
I just always heard about Daniel in the lion's den, and that he was spared because he believed in the true and living God, but I never heard that the ones that had accused him were thrown into the lion's
Yeah.
den.
Them,
Next chapter's over
their wives, their families, they risked their whole family by being crooked and set Daniel up. But Daniel knew what he was going to do. He was going to serve the Lord. So let's read this again. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. John 14:14. And have you ever thought about what Daniel might have been asking as he was going in the lion's den? You think he was asking the Lord for something?
Yeah.
I know I would be. If I was getting ready to be lunch, I would be asking the Lord for help. And I think it's okay to remind the Lord, you know, Lord, you said if I ask anything in your name, that you will do it. And so